Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in a few moments. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2020 Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast. Over 400 of us, representing over 80 communal organizations, have gathered together virtually to celebrate our diversity and our community in the largest interfaith gathering in this region. We are pleased to welcome Karina Calabro to sing We Gather Together. The words are on screen. Please keep yourselves on mute, but feel free to sing along at home.
We gather together to ask for God's blessing, to live in community, seeking God's will. We come now as sisters and brothers determined to heal the divine and the wrong in us still. Singing God's
Good morning and shalom salam. My name is Chidam Doğan, and on behalf of my co-chairs Bill Darker, Tiffany Hamilton, and Gary Trachton, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2020 Westchester Fairfield Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast, the virtual edition. We are so pleased that so many of you are joining us and encourage you to take a few minutes to scroll through the many screens and view all the faces. While we wish we could be together in person for the amazing event, we hope that you will find today's program as enlightening, impactful, and inspiring as always. I'm so pleased that this year our Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast is even more diverse religiously and ethnically than ever before. It is an outstanding testament to the incredible work being done by our communities here in Westchester and Fairfield counties. What is more, it sends a message of pluralism and respect for the other, and that is best response to hate. We are extremely grateful to all the communal partners who join us in supporting this year's event, making it a true community event. These organizations' names are also available on the event webpage, and the list will be shared after the event has concluded. We are also incredibly grateful to this year's planning committee who worked tirelessly to put today's program together and bring it to this virtual platform. Our deep gratitude also to the table facilitators who will guide us through the breakout discussions later in the program, and to the many volunteers and most especially to the staff who handled many details of today's event. The Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast was conceived by AJC and evolved in response to the terror attacks on 9/11. In this spirit, we are committed to celebrating diversity and appreciation for the other. That is how we build bridges of understanding. It is as fitting and as needed a response to today as it was 19 years ago. And we recommit to celebrate and strengthen our diverse communities together. To open this year's breakfast, I'm honored to welcome Rabbi Joshua Hammerman, Senior Rabbi of Temple Beth El of Stanford, for our invocation.
God, source of life, of hope, and of renewal, we're grateful for your gift of life, even as we gather at a time of plague, when so many have suffered and died. We pray for them and for our future, and for a speedy end to this menace. We also pray for an end to the scourge of racism that has plagued our nation for 4 centuries. But we see a glimmer of hope in the new partnerships that have been forged among people of all faiths and backgrounds. We see hope in the glorious diversity of our country and in the promise of advancement, as embodied in the groundbreaking election of Kamala Harris as vice president. We look to our new Biden administration for leadership in surmounting the many obstacles that we face and pray that you help them. Bless our local leaders as well, including those whom we honor today, and protect them and all of us from the malaise and exhaustion that so easily can set in as we confront a relentless virus. Bless their sacred work, including most notably the welcoming of immigrants and refugees to our shores, a generosity of spirit that has always been the hallmark of our nation. Keenly focus our eyes on the goal of building a society where justice and equality reign, where we all hear the blood of George Floyd crying out from the earth. May the ruptures that have shaken us hasten the day when real transformation can occur, and when the dreams of our forebears will be realized at long last, when, in the words of the great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who passed away just last week, we can see the trace of God in the face of the stranger. Help us, O God, to eradicate hate, to place our knee on racism's neck, yet to pursue this mission with determination and love, so that we will all become anti-racists and anti-Semites. Amen.
Thank you to our elected officials who have lent their voices of support and unity to this program today. They include new friends and stalwart champions of our Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast. The faith community appreciates the opportunity to work in partnership with many government bodies. We honor them for their acknowledgement of the role that faith plays in many people's lives, for their belief that strength comes from a celebration of our diversity. Our community is thrilled to honor 3 outstanding individuals who truly embody the theme and justice for all. It is my pleasure to turn the program over to my co-chair, Tiffany Hamilton, and our 3 honorees, who will share some thoughts with us and reflect on this year's breakfast theme.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to one of the exciting portions of today's Diversity Breakfast. It is where we get a chance to hear and learn about our honorees. I am Tiffany Hamilton. I have the privilege and honor not only to moderate today's conversation, but to also serve as one of the co-chairs or tri-chairs of this year's breakfast. Thank you to all of the sponsors. Thank you to AJC, Westchester, and Fairfield County for bringing us together. The pandemic tried to shut us down, but we said no. This breakfast is so important. We decided to get us all together this morning. So thank you for taking the time out to be with us. Thank you, AJC, Westchester, and Fairfield for continuing to create spaces to talk about this year's theme and justice for all. today, we have an opportunity to hear from our honorees. So what we'll do is take a moment to allow them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into our dialogue. So let's start with Reverend Trollinger. Could you please introduce yourself and share your organization of affiliation?
Well, good morning, everyone, and I thank all of you for being here with us. And by this way of Zoom breakfast, this is the most non-fat breakfast I will have in my life by doing Zoom. My coffee is hot and everything else is good. Well, I always like to put smiles on people's face, and that's how I really like to always introduce myself. I am Reverend Erwin Lee Trollinger Jr. I'm the proud pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church. I'm entering into my 10th year here at Calvary Baptist Church of White Plains. I'm also a product of Westchester County. I graduated from Woodlands High School. I'm not going to tell you what year, but I did graduate from there. And also I am the president of the Ministers Fellowship Council for the City of White Plains and vicinity, and also the proud dad of 4 gorgeous 3 young ladies and 1 gentleman. They are my heart and my mission. So I hope that introduces me a little bit.
Thank you so much. Welcome and congratulations. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization affiliation.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me, and thank you for this recognition. My name is Sam Wallace. I am the Executive Director of Yonkers Partners in Education, YPI. I'm actually a teacher by training and a Westchester resident originally, and after a journey around sort of the country teaching, landed right back in my home county, where as an organization, YPI works with students in the Yonkers public schools to help them get ready for college, help them get into college, and ultimately help them stay as a way to break the cycle of poverty and see upward mobility for our students.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Last but definitely not least, Ms. Catalina, could you introduce yourself?
So it is an honor and privilege to be here this morning with all of you. I was the founder and executive director of an organization called Building One Community, the Center for Immigrant Opportunity, organization that we started with a group of stakeholders, including day workers, people who worked cleaning houses, people from all walks of life 10 years ago. I just left the organization as its founding executive director. The organization is in wonderful hands, and it was something that was carefully planned because I do believe that leadership has to be renewed. So that was part of the original plan when we started the organization. I'm a proud mother of 2 wonderful young women who have 3 passports, who are citizens of the world. And at this point, one is in Colombia and one is in London. So thank you for this invitation, and it's an honor to be here with the Reverend and with Sam as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now you all see why these are our honorees for this year, right? So, you know, when you listen to the introductions that you all shared, many of you have a connection beyond being honorees, right? You're familiar with transition, follow me, whether it's transitioning as an immigrant into new spaces or having access to new spaces, whether it's transitioning through education, right? From secondary to post-secondary education, or transitioning spiritually, the growth and development that takes place through there. So when we think about transition and all of the variables therein, and we think about today's breakfast theme and justice for all, I want to start with Sam. When you heard about the theme and got your recognition, what does and justice for all mean for you? And perhaps share how that manifests itself in the work that you do.
Sure. So I just want to start by saying this year, I think we've seen more people than ever fighting for that idea of and justice for all. And so I recognize that my recognition this morning is one amongst millions of folks this year doing the work whether they're COVID doctors going into areas where there's high levels of COVID, or getting people registered to vote, or fighting for racial injustice in the streets. There's so much going on that we can be proud of around the country. And so I take what we do and what I do as just a piece of a much broader initiative. But I will say that when I think about my piece in this work of End Justice for All, I think about a student that I had. So I started teaching in the Mississippi Delta, and I taught at a school in a town that was divided racially by train tracks. One side, we had white students going to a private school, and on the other side was a predominantly Black neighborhood with a predominantly Black school that, believe it or not, was still called, and I'm not going to say the full name, but the School for Color, which was insane to think about in our modern era. And I had one student in particular that haunts me every day because she had the intellectual curiosity unlike anyone I've ever met in my life. And I think every day about what barriers were put in her way, and she still maintained an outlook on the world to be intellectually curious. And so the work, that might sound Mississippi like a long way away, but we see a lot of the same barriers right here in Westchester County. And we see it in Yonkers, where my organization operates. And so when I think about End Justice for All, I think about what are the barriers we put in place as a society for our young people, whether it's down south or right here. And our job, I see, is to unleash those barriers, unlock them, so that our students can have End Justice for All and to let their voices be heard. And that's what my organization's committed to, and what I'm so proud our staff and huge community of volunteers are doing every day.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. And the power of education and information therein when folks just have access, right? And we support that intellectual curiosity. Thank you, Sam. Catalina, what about you? When you think of And Justice for All, how does that tie in to the work that you do, and what does it mean for you?
Yeah, so I want to follow up on what Sam said, because I think that this last 6-8 months, I guess, by now, have been an amazing opportunity for us to see what working for justice is all about, but also about injustices and about the lack of opportunity. So when I think about justice, I just think about there's no justice without equal opportunity. You know, the country or the neighborhood where you're born, or the language that you speak, or the color of your skin should not determine, our future. At Building One Community, I had the honor and the privilege to meet absolutely amazing individuals who call Connecticut home, from countries as diverse as Haiti, Guatemala, Syria, or Ivory Coast. And I will take all of your time this breakfast to share these stories that all of them had, and just their stories that are of hardship and determination. But when I think about their heartbreaking stories and also their inspiring stories, and the reasons why they left their homes, their hopes and the dreams that they brought when they arrived to this country, I just think about one word: it's opportunity. And in the case of these stories that were part of my day-to-day, is that actually the lack of opportunity. We used to, and those of you who are in education, we used to refer to the quote-unquote achievement gap, when we're trying to understand students from underserved communities, or the gap between aspirations and attainment that Sam just referred to. But this is not just about the children. It's about the parents. It's about all the adults, so many adults whose lives are filled with unsurmountable obstacles to absolutely no fault of their own. So in my view, the best way to really think about this is to frame it in terms of what we call the opportunity gap. There will be no justice for all if those of us who were born into a certain category of opportunity are not fully aware about the huge discrepancies that exist not only in remote places across the world, but also right here in our own backyard, in Westchester, in Fairfield County. We live in a world, in a country where there's not only an opportunity gap, but there's also an opportunity myth. Many people still believe in that myth, that it's all about working hard, and that's enough. We need to dispel that myth and want and work to make these opportunities possible. It is up to all of us to understand, to own, and to be intentional about what we can do as individuals and as a collective so that we can contribute to making our community a place where there's no opportunity gap and there's justice for all.
Very powerful, Catalina. Thank you so much. Very, very powerful words. And it reminds me of the mission of the university that I work for, Pace University. Our mission is opportunity, right? And so thinking about opportunity and those that have awareness and access to, and those who don't, and taking that responsibility of bridging that gap and dispelling the myth of opportunity gaps. So I really appreciate those words. Reverend Trollinger, what about you? And justice for all, what does that mean for you?
Well, I'm going to build on what Catalina had mentioned, just an important word for my life, and that word is intentional. Intentional. When we look at the word "and justice for all," as you know, preachers are wordsmiths. You know, we look at words and we define them in such ways. And so I always teach my ministers to, there's no word that's in the Bible not to go along with whatever you're preaching or teaching. So the word "and" caught my attention, because when we talk about and is a conjunction. Something else is about to be spoken, said, determined, make happen. And so I thought about the word before it, freedom and justice for all. And it's possible for people to be physically free, but not to be mentally have justice at the same time. And so when I think about justice, I think about the fact that the word defined means a just behavior or treatment. It also brings into being what is a genuine respect for all people, the legitimacy, the soundness. The root word of justice is fair and just. And so in the work that I do here in the church and the work that I do in the larger community, that no matter what the shade, color, or orientation, I look to make sure that that person is able to have the legitimate right to experience the fairness of behavior by everyone. Catalina told about a story. Catalina, I remember, I think it was last year, I stood for the first time on the steps of the United States Federal Courthouse here in White Plains, along with a group of other people that was talking about the injustices of people being arrested because they were not legal citizens, and children coming home, I'm about to cry, coming home and mama and daddy not there. Where is the justice in that? You know? And so it pains me to know that someone can think that they are superior and greater than somebody else. And we here in America make a pledge and say that we want justice for all. So no matter how old they are, no matter what color they are, no matter what orientation they are, there has to be a fair and just treatment that is equal on the playing field. And when mercy needs to step up, justice then can step aside and cause the right actions and the right things to occur. So our babies in the South of Mississippi are not in cages, but they are in warm homes while they await for their moms and dads to retrieve them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Powerful. Thank you, Reverend Trollinger. Thank you so much. You know, we've had an opportunity to not only learn about you, but what "and justice for all" means to you and for the work that you do. And so just on behalf of all of us that are here at the breakfast, we want to say thank you for the work that you do. And this recognition is definitely in order. And so as we bring our conversation to a close, maybe there's a charge that you have for the participants of this year's breakfast. You know, we see and have seen, particularly over the last 7 or 8 months, the unrest in our communities, the labor for injustice for all. And there may be someone watching this morning that's tired and exhausted, right? And so perhaps you could share maybe a charge or words of advice for the participants in today's breakfast. Catalina, any closing words from you?
So it'll be a little presumptuous for me to give advice to, this panel and to the people that are here with us after all of us have worked so hard to address issues of injustice around us. But I would like to suggest or share 3 words of concepts that I try to live by. The first one is relationships. If we see each other, we will hear each other. We will see the humanity in every person, regardless of their background and ethnicity, and we will begin to address the underlying issues that affect so many people who live among us. We cannot address an issue or solve a problem that we do not understand, but we need to understand the issues from the voices of those who are living the injustice. The second one is building, Madam, what Reverend said, is intentionality. This is not about waiting to see what others are doing. It is about actively and intentionally seeking the role that each one of us can play in making our neighborhoods, our communities, and the world a place where there is justice for all. And third is, we need to be bold, brave, and humble as we commit to making changes to support marginalized communities and seek justice for all. We need to challenge ourselves and others around us. This path will be full of ups and downs, and most likely will make us and others at times feel uncomfortable. It is okay to feel uncomfortable. As we embark on this journey, learning from others and with others will require courage, boldness, perseverance, and humility.
Wow, thank you, Catalina. What powerful, powerful words. If we see each other, we need to see each other and hear each other. Approach it with a bit of intentionality, being bold, brave, and humble. Awesome. Thank you so much. Reverend Trollinger, what about you? What's your charge to give to this group?
My charge is to those who are listening on this particular morning, and I wrote it out, is I charge and challenge each and every one of you to allow the influence of transformative justice to cause you to see new horizons and thoughts and actions that will empower the least and the lost among us. I charge you to see humanity as a gift and a talent that has been bestowed upon each and every one of us by the living God that is uniquely placed inside of every one of us. And lastly, I charge you not to allow what I like to call the trauma, the drama, and the trouble to lock you in to be pessimistic instead of being optimistic. I dare you to reach, teach, and yes, preach justice for all. Be intentional, be transformative, and be optimistic, and justice for all. My charge.
Thank you, Reverend Trollinger. Powerful charge, powerful charge. Sam, what about you?
So I, as a teacher, often didn't like to tell students or give charges. I like to ask questions. And so I actually think that that's the charge, is to ask the right questions. And I think about a student of mine who was acting out and everyone was ready to suspend this student, but we asked a different question and said, not why are you acting out, but what are you doing this weekend? And I'll never forget the student said to me, I'm giving my mom away at her wedding. And it dawned that he was devastated He thought he was losing his mother and was acting out as a result. But when we realized that there was a different question to ask, it got at something very different in him, and we were able to bring him back rather than suspend him, or in so many ways that story is applicable. So I just think about asking the right questions to get the right answer. And just the last thing I would say is, as we're all going through these days that are filled with Zoom and maybe gloom and doom at the same time, reconnecting with values. And so I've asked, just Google a value sheet and find what are the ones that resonate and try to connect with those every day. And I think that's been really helpful for my team as we're tackling the world as it is now. So I'm so thankful to even have a voice here and share. So thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. What powerful, powerful honorees that we have for this year's breakfast. If we ask the right questions, it not only allows us to hear, but it allows us to see. And then our reaction can move from a head issue to a heart issue, allowing us to be intentional, to be brave, to be bold, while carrying humility and seeking justice for all. Thank you all for participating in our moderated discussion with our honorees this morning. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your breakfast, enjoy your coffee, and enjoy seeking justice for all. Thank you.
Our honorees are each receiving this unique two-sided kaleidoscope, symbolizing multiple viewpoints merged together. Each side reflects a different, unique design, demonstrating that two people can view the same image but see it differently. This makes the strong statement that none of us needs to sacrifice what makes each of us and our traditions unique and special. But when joined together, the perspective and image is even more powerful. Please welcome Dr. Ali Javed, Chair of the Board of the Upper Westchester Muslim Society, to present the Lifetime Achievement Award to Richard S. Cohen.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God Almighty, the most beneficent and the most merciful. Good morning, Shalom, and Assalamu Alaikum. My name is Dr. Ali Javed, Chairman of the Board of Upper Westchester Muslim Society. Thank you, Tiffany, and our honorees. Your words were incredibly powerful. It is certainly an honor and pleasure to introduce Richard Cohen, former co-chair of AGC's Interreligious and Intergroup Relations Committee, for his commitment and extraordinary efforts to bring the Muslim and Jewish communities together. I have known Richard for almost a decade. I am delighted to introduce him for this special honor. Richard is a pioneer in multicultural relationships. In his outreach efforts, he developed friendships with members of all Muslim communities in Westchester and beyond. His network of Muslim relationship is so extensive that he introduced Muslims around the county to each other. When UWMS coordinated a county-wide iftar, a few years ago, we called on Richard to provide the contact information for the leaders of other Muslim organizations. We didn't know each other, he did. He often came to our Friday Jummah services to support Muslims, especially when Muslims were facing severe prejudice around the country. He wanted to help us gain better acceptance as a mainstay of the broader culture. At services and other events, he demonstrated a Muslim community is the best in Jewish values and the golden rule: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism share. Treat each other like oneself. As a Jew, he understood the wounds of being treated like a foreigner just because your customs are different. He empathized and identified with us when a prominent imam asked him to send a letter to the State Department to support his asylum application. He gladly complied. Richard and his wife, Marcia, brought together people of all faiths and colors around their dining room table and learn about and enjoy each other as fellow human beings. For years, he organized large gatherings like the We Are All Immigrants Seder, where he managed to keep the same intimacy among scores of attendees of different backgrounds. He provided windows into our different cultures and faith by having everyone speak as part of the Passover message, that we all count and should be free from the bondage of oppression. He and Marsha were the only non-Muslim at several of UWMS fundraisers for Islamic Center project and the new building. In fact, Richard served as a liaison with the seller, the UJA, and created a friendly environment for both sides to negotiate the terms and effectuate the purchase. The new building had been a dream in our community for decades. Richard is on the board of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council of New York and the Inter-Jewish Muslim Alliance. He is an avid supporter of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom and co-sponsored one of their programs at the annual conference last week. When hate was in the rise in 2017, he spearheaded an anti-hate resolution specifically addressing bigotry against Muslims, Jews, and other ethnic groups. The Westchester County Board of Legislators passed it unanimously. There's so much more to say, but I will end with that, what Richard and Marsha did during her bout with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in late 2019. After her diagnosis, Richard and Marsha set up a small nonprofit called Marsha's Light Foundation to foster cross-cultural relationship on a grassroots level. Last December, before COVID and while Marsha was still with us, Marsha's Light came to our masjid and organized a halal and kosher luncheon after our Jummah services that not only strengthened Muslim-Jewish bonds, but highlighted the humanity and mortality we all share. Richard, on behalf of UWMS and all Muslims all over the area, I thank you for all you do. You certainly deserve this honor. Thank you so much again.
Thank you ever so much, Ali. I'm so proud to be your partner and friend. And thank you to the Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast Committee for shining a light on the immense value of bringing people of different faiths and cultures together. And I'd like to thank the AJC for entrusting me for years with the missionary work of forming relationships among Muslims and Jews, and to Cliff Wolf in particular for advising me and bringing me into the fold so we could become partners. I'd also like to say hello to all my Muslim friends, in fact, all my intercultural friends. I miss everyone. I'd like to pass on a few lessons I've learned during my travels. When I first started reaching out to Muslim communities, I was afraid of the unknown, afraid of women wearing hijabs, not knowing what I'd experienced when I went to Jummah services at area mosques. But what started out as a plan, as a strategy, quickly became personal, and whatever concerns I had soon vanished in the warm hospitality with which Muslim congregations received me and my colleagues. We are all aware of the stereotyping that people of one group have about another, how Jews and Muslims, blacks and whites, and other ethnicities are supposed to see each other. Through my travels, I have witnessed time and again that magical light bulb moment, when a lifetime of prejudgments instantly disappears once we break the ice and engage with each other. I have seen tension and mystery melt into smiles, humor, and an intense desire to learn about each other. The lesson? We have been programmed to imbue people who are different than us with certain characteristics. We tend to label people different than us. The problem is that once we do that, we relate to the label and not the person. I've learned that when we get to know the person behind the label, a rich world of diversity opens up where knowledge replaces distortion and friendship and trust develop. The second lesson is from Marsha's illness. A few short weeks after Marsha and I came back from the trip of a lifetime, being hosted by a Palestinian mother of 4 in the Middle East in the summer of 2019, Marsha, as Ali said, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She was a crisis management expert who always found the calm within the storm. Her clarity in wanting to address unthinkable subjects that even doctors avoid allowed us to find intense meaning even in the face of cancer and impending death. She passed away last February. Marcia taught me how to be direct and focus on what is important, letting go of the small stuff that bogs us down. The lesson? All of us are put on earth only a short while. It's important to spend this time with purpose, a purpose bigger than ourselves. I'd like to leave with a quote that is a favorite of my friend, Imam Shafiq Chase. It's from Martin Luther King, who said, "I am convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other." So let's take Martin Luther King's advice and get unseparated. Thank you again to everyone. Be well.
This stunning artwork is presented to Richard S. Cohen. The words in Hebrew and English represent community, excellence, integrity, and repairing the world. Fitting words indeed.
Good morning. My name is Gary Tracton, and I'm one of the co-chairs of today's Diversity Breakfast. I enjoy having the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, the Honorable Rebecca Dallet, Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. As we have learned, at least from following election campaigns, who is granted access to what brand of justice is highly dependent on the makeup of the nation's highest court. The same is true on a state level. And although an ideal of the rule of law envisions neutral empires calling balls and strikes, we know that judges are neither computers nor video replay monitors. Rather, as their title reflects, they are human beings making judgments. And we know also that those judgments are informed by their experiences, senses of justice, and perspectives on the purposes of not only the laws that they interpret, but on the purpose of law itself. In short, judges make decisions in small measure based on what, and justice for all, means to them. In Purple, Wisconsin, seats on the highest court are filled by nonpartisan general elections. Justice Dallet won election in 2018 in a tight, hard-fought race that received much national attention, in which he was endorsed by now President-elect Joe Biden and former Attorney General Eric Holder and other prominent national figures. Upon her election, the balance of the court went from, generally speaking, a 6-3 conservative to liberal ratio to a 4-3 one. The lines have been well drawn. While her opponent touted his respect for Anthony Scalia, Justice Dallet spoke of Ruth Bader Ginsburg as her role model. In May of this year, Justice Dallet received high grades for her opening remarks in a Milwaukee-based virtual program created by the Illinois Holocaust Museum about the life and times of the late Justice Ginsburg. We cannot think of a better person to speak to this year's breakfast theme. And I thank Marcia Grubel of our committee for putting her name forward for our consideration. I am pleased to now introduce to you Justice Rebecca Dallet.
Greetings from the Wisconsin Supreme Court and from my home. I am honored to speak with you this morning about the criminal justice system in America and whether it has in fact lived up to its promise of justice for all. I grew up in a Reformed synagogue in Cleveland, Ohio, where my passion and fire for justice was kindled, especially through my participation in the National Federation of Temple Youth. It was there I discovered the importance of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, and made it my life's work. I was elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court in April of 2018. Prior to becoming a state Supreme Court justice, I spent 10 years as a county trial court judge, overseeing a high volume of criminal and civil cases. A judge is supposed to be a neutral arbiter, a dispassionate referee, just an umpire calling balls and strikes, not an advocate for policy. But the decisions we make as umpires, as referees, are necessarily drawn from our own experience. In baseball, umpires have a defined strike zone that is supposed to be applied uniformly to each batter to determine whether a pitch is a ball or a strike. But in today's criminal justice system, that strike zone is not uniform. It is bigger. The risk of having a strike called against you much greater if you are a person of color. Imagine if there was one small strike for those with lighter skin, maybe a slightly larger and tougher zone for Latino or Asian players, and an impossibly wide and tall strike zone for Black players. That is today's criminal justice system, separate and not really anywhere close to equal. The reality, though, is that by the time cases get to a judge in a trial court, or even more rarely to a state appellate court, most of the subjective decisions have already been made. The decision to make an arrest, to prosecute. Most cases get addressed through a plea bargain, giving judges very little opportunity to ensure justice is done. Once a case goes to trial, a judge must ensure the rules are followed. But our opinion that a case shouldn't be brought isn't relevant. Of course, if the police or prosecutors have broken the rules or have violated someone's constitutional rights, we are required to act, but we can't simply right a wrong because we want to. We have to follow the law. Operating case by case, the reality is that the most systemic issues, which result in the aggregate where people of color bear the brunt of enforcement and incarceration, are very, very difficult to address. So we must think about justice more broadly if we want to have an impact. I'm inspired by the first woman to serve on the United States Supreme Court, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who said, "We don't accomplish anything in this world alone, and whatever happens is the result of the whole tapestry of one's life and all the weavings of individual threads from one to another that create something." We have to do our part. Our job is to interpret and apply the law when there are disputes without fear or favor, but we can do so with an eye towards justice. I joined a unique state Supreme Court that is made up of 6 women justices and just 1 male justice. When the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was asked, "When will there be enough women on the court?" she replied, "When all of them are. After all, for 200 years it was all men, and nobody thought there was anything unusual about that." But I also joined the court at what I think we can all acknowledge is an unusual time in our country's history. Our country is as divided as it has ever been, perhaps since the Civil War. We have massive political divisions. In fact, it seems more Americans are moving into enclaves where we almost always only interact with those who are most similar to us. But Justice Louis Brandeis said, "America has believed that in differentiation, not in uniformity, lies the path to progress. It has acted on this belief. It has advanced human happiness, and it has prospered." I must associate myself with these words. Our future lies not in division, but also not in uniformity. It lies in accepting and honoring our differences, in welcoming immigrants and building diverse communities. It lies in actively seeking justice whenever and wherever we can. I know that with some renewed effort, our justice system can live up to the expectations our people have of us. I know we can find common ground between those who disagree politically to do better in policymaking. When we identify and recognize that policies have disparate racial impact, the courts can step in and demand a change. But let's try to get there before the highest court of a state has to step in. There are a few things we can do. First, our courts and our justice system must lean more towards transparency. The more we can learn about how the judicial branch of government is working and can work, the more we as judges and justices show the world about how we function, the better. Second, we must always engage in real study about the real world impact of our decisions. We must recognize that our country is rightly criticized for the data that show how people of color, especially Blacks, are being left behind. And that is what I want to spend the remainder of my time talking about today. In the United States, we incarcerate a much higher percentage of our Black neighbors than our white neighbors. We can no longer blithely accept that reality. There are a plethora of statistics that should deeply upset us, that should shake us to our core. But let me give you one simple one. Across the country, according to the National Urban League Sentencing Project, Blacks are incarcerated in state prisons at 5 times the rates of whites. In 5 states, including Wisconsin and New Jersey, the rate is 10 times. A Black person in New Jersey is 10 times more likely to be sent to prison than a white person. In a free nation, that simply cannot stand. The Sentencing Project looked at dozens of studies that have examined the cause of racial and ethnic disparities in our criminal justice system and identified 3 main contributors: policies and practices, implicit bias and stereotyping at each phase of the system, and structural disadvantages such as poverty that result in higher rates of offending and arrest. Now again, I'm a Supreme Court justice, not a policymaker, so all I can do is suggest a few things we can look at that can have a real impact. Most simply, we can change laws that have disparate racial impact. For example, it used to be that we treated crack differently than powder cocaine under federal sentencing laws at a 100-to-1 ratio. One was used more widely in the Black community, the other more widely amongst whites. And drug use is actually pretty equal across racial lines. So in order to get sent to prison under a mandatory minimum in a federal court, you only needed to have enough crack for yourself, while you needed half a kilo of powder cocaine to trigger the same treatment. That was crazy and simply racist. Another example is simply restoring more judicial discretion and ending mandatory minimums and 3 strikes laws. These harsh laws in practice have had a tremendous effect on Black communities and contributed greatly to mass incarceration. A state can also restore and reform its parole system to reduce backlogs and make more offenders eligible for parole. In addition, we must recognize and train every actor in the criminal justice system on the role of implicit bias, including judges. More than anything, we as practitioners in the law must decide that we believe that bias can have an impact and that we have a duty to be fair and impartial. We must all acknowledge that a society that treats people differently because of their ethnicity, beliefs, or color of their skin is a society that is failing to live up to its promise. We have learned from history the cost of allowing injustice and biased treatment. Anne Frank wrote in her diary, "I keep my ideals because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." We must believe we can do better for all of us, not just for ourselves, but for all of us. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "It isn't enough to talk about peace, one must believe in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it, one must work at it." So let's get to work. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Friedhanser, and I am the co-chair of AJC Westchester Fairfield's Interfaith and Intergroup Relations Committee, along with Cheryl Sachs. One great way to continue the work of the breakfast is through the Sacred Spaces program, which offers an interfaith or interethnic group the chance to enter the sacred space of another for a worship service and a chance to learn about their traditions and practices. It is an outgrowth of the breakfast, and we have conducted many programs since June 2012 when it began: Mormon, Catholic, Episcopal, Muslim, Jewish, and more. Of course, at this time, we're having virtual visits. Please let Sacred Spaces Chair Harriet Zeller know if you would like to host the Sacred Spaces program in your sacred space. We do this once a quarter and are now looking for future spaces. Now that you've been inspired by speeches and by the example of others, we come to what for many is truly the highlight of the breakfast: an opportunity to build bridges, learn from those outside of your faith and ethnic group, and to grapple with diversity and how we promote it the rest of the year. In a normal year, we would at this time have roundtable discussions. This year, through the technology of Zoom, you will be randomly assigned to a breakout discussion group. Please click Join Breakout Session when it pops up on your screen. Each group will have a facilitator who is prepared with a series of questions and who will guide your group's discussion. We encourage and hope that you will all keep your cameras and microphones on and fully engage in the conversation. May we join together next year in health, unity, and peace.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cheryl Sachs. Together with Nancy Freed Tanzer, we are proud to serve as co-chairs of AJC Westchester Fairfield's Interfaith and Intergroup Relations Committee, under which this Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast is organized. It's wonderful to see over 400 members of our Westchester Fairfield community participating in this 20th Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast. Many thanks to Acting Regional Director Myra Clark Siegel and AJC Regional Associate Director Jill Friedman for all their work in organizing this event. We also want to extend our sincerest thanks to the 4 co-chairs of this breakfast: Bill Darger of the Westchester Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Cheatham Doan of Peace Islands Institute and the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, Tiffany Hamilton, Chief Diversity Officer of Pace University, and Gary Tracton of Westchester Jewish Council and Westchester Human Rights Commission, as well as the many members of the Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast Committee. Our community has grown so much since that first breakfast held in the aftermath of 9/11, when just 40 clergy gathered to affirm their solidarity in the diversity, in the pluralism, and in the democracy of our American society. Their commitment to these ideals has continued these 20 years to unite us across the region in a celebration of our diversity and a vigorous rededication to advance the welfare of all.
Today, we'd like to invite you to join the Westchester Fairfield Community of Conscience, a body of individuals who uphold the ideals of justice, of equality, of dignity, of opportunity for all, while rejecting all forms of hate, bigotry, violence, and incendiary partisanship. Through the Westchester Fairfield Community of Conscience, we can speak with one powerful voice when there is a need, in response to something negative, such as a hate crime, or even better, in supporting something positive, such as the eventual signing of the No Hate Act into law to protect us all from hatred. Together, we can advocate for issues of common concern. Importantly, we can continue to build bridges of understanding within our communities. In the coming days, you will receive more information about the Westchester Fairfield Community of Conscience, and we hope you will join us in pursuing the dream that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. thundered so simply but powerfully: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. May we continue to work together to build the United States of America as one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. Stay well, thank you, and a happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Almighty God, we gather here together. We believe we are all made in your image and likeness. We call you by different names. We worship you in different ways. But yet we know you are the one God to whom we all turn for consolation, for solace. In this season, in this time, we turn to you in a special way for solace and consolation. We know so much suffering, so much pain. We know the pain of COVID-19. We know the millions of those who have suffered from it and those who have died, and we commend them to you. We ask your blessing in a special way on those who have cared for our sisters and brothers who have been infected with this virus. Keep them strong, enable them to persevere. Almighty God, we also know that even though we believe we are all made in your image and likeness, too often our humanity and the differences which we celebrate have been a cause for hatred and divisiveness and division. And so in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd, we ask you to bring us together as a nation. Help us to deal with the issues of race and inequality, the lack of opportunity and access, which still plagues us, not merely as a country, but plagues us as a world. Help us to be better reconciled to one another. Help us to be more together as your sons and your daughters. We ask you also, as we are in still this divisive political season, help us to see the common good as that which draws us together, and enable us to be more understanding of those with whom we disagree, and sometimes disagree so very, very significantly. May our disagreements not turn to hate. May they not turn to anger. May they not turn to denigration of one another, but help us to build together a world and a country which is more reflective of the good that is part of every human being. And as we approach this common day of giving thanks, we give you thanks for the things that have blessed us individually, those things that bless us as a country, those things that bless us as a world. And even in the midst of the suffering, the darkness, the pain, the divisiveness, we know there are reasons to give thanks to you, and let us never forget what they are, either individually, as communities, as a world. And so, Almighty God, we ask your forgiveness for what we have done wrong. We praise you for what others have done right. And we ask you to call us together as those made in your image and likeness, that we may foster your good in our world. All this we ask not merely during this Thanksgiving season, but we ask it forever and ever. Amen.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of gray, for purple mountains' majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thee good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
Thank you to our sponsors and partners, and to our facilitators and the many volunteers who made the 2020 Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast such a success. This concludes this year's Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast. Let us all pledge to maintain the bonds we formed together at this breakfast by being there together for one another in good times and in bad. Please find ways to make this event continue to resonate throughout the year as we jointly pursue and justice for all. Have a wonderful and meaningful Thanksgiving. Stay safe.